there's been very little done, critical temperatures on important economical Australian cultivars basically. And this is really an area of study that would be interesting to do but quite difficult, and certainly whether we've got gaps in our literature. Alright, cultivar differences. There's quite a lot of differences between your cultivars, and their susceptibility, so different cultivars freeze at different temperatures, and also their recovery. And by recovery I'm talking about secondary shoot fruitfulness. And there's been very few studies done on the economically important Australian cultivars, Shiraz, Chardonnay, Pinot, Riesling, Cab Sav. Most of the, a lot of the research done's been done in America and on American varieties. Within the literature there's quite a lot of contradiction. Winkler basically stated that varieties that bear well with short spur pruning will produce almost a full crop when shoots are entirely killed by frost. But we actually know that secondary shoot fruitfulness will never give you a 100% crop. So even though you'll find in the literature little statements like that, given a bit more research you'll find that's not necessarily the case. So post-frost management, the first thing you need to think about is, once you've got frosted, is it going to be economically viable for you to actually do anything? Now, when you're thinking about that, you don't want to go the day after a frost and go, oh my God, I've wiped out my crop and I'm just going to wipe it out for the year and walk away. What you need to do is you need to wait, and you need to have a look at your secondary or your secondary shoots, and have a look at your secondary shoot fruitfulness. And so that means waiting a couple of months for the inflorescences to come through. Go and do some bunch counts. Work out whether it's going to be economically viable for you to manage that crop. If it's low, wipe out your crop for the year and move on. If you're going to get something off it, it's probably worth you managing it. The last 2 points is just to show that there's also contradiction. So frosted shoots should be removed, or they'll reduce the growth and productivity of secondary buds. Kismatis and Kisler also found that there wasn't any evidence that post-frost management made any difference in yield or quality. And so quite a lot of contradiction within the literature. So the other thing you need to think about is cane versus spur pruned, and a lot of the research that's been done, particularly stuff done in New Zealand, is done on cane prune vines. They cane prune over there a lot more than we tend to spur prune. And the post-frost management of cane versus spur pruning is quite different, because with cane prune vines, you need to really manage your cane prune vines to ensure good quality, strong canes to lay down for your following year. And without that management, you'll end up with a lot of lateral growth, and you may not end up with a nice balanced vine for the following year. It's not as important with a spur prune vine. The lateral growth's not going to kill you, and the laterals actually produce quite a lot of secondary shoots and secondary bunches, and I'll show you that later on as we come into our results. So yeah, if you've got cane prune vines, if you get frosted with cane prune vines, you're really going to have to think about your management to get good quality canes to lay down for the following year. With spur prune vines, not as much worried. So moving into the 2006 trial, we had 2 sites. The first site at Coombe Farm, set up by Xavier. The second site was at St Hubert, set up by Rachel Ashley and Tim McCarthy. We had three treatments at each site, so one of no management, so frosted vines. If you have a look here, this is the no management, this is at Coombe Farm. This is basically what they look like. This is the second treatment, where the damaged shoots were removed back into the green tissue, just the green healthy tissue. And the final one was removing the shoots just above the basal node. So the aims of the trial was to take into the best canopy management, taking into account the recoverable yields for that year, so your secondary crop. The ripening, we wanted to see whether cutting your vines back to the basal node or leaving them was going to make much of a difference in your ripening date. And particularly with a late frost like the ones we had in 2006 in October, our ripening date ended up being in April, and if we were going to start severely managing our crops and it shifted our ripening date a month ahead, that may actually make a big difference to whether you do something, because it may actually influence whether the vines or whether your fruit ripens. Manageability at pruning was doing nothing, going to leave you a big mess at the end of the year at pruning time for the following year, where we're going to be able to get anything out of it. And also cost. Is it economically worth trying a post-frost management treatment? So these are the results. As you can see, the no management treatment definitely yielded the highest profit. And when we're talking about profit, this is the return per tonne per hectare, and just not profit including wages and the yearly ongoing costs, just profit from tonne per hectare. And then with the remove the damaged tissue and all shoots removed back off the cordon, these were minus the implementation cost. So to actually do the remove the damaged tissue, it cost $550 per hectare to implement that treatment, and for the all shoots removed back to the cordon, $650 per hectare to implement that treatment. The yield for the no management treatment was significantly higher than the yields for the other two treatments, and this was largely due to the fact that with the no management treatment there was a lot of lateral growth, a lot of lateral shoots, and most of those lateral shoots were bearing. There was no difference or no significant difference in ripening, so Baumé varied from 12.1 to 11.7. So even cutting the shoots back to the basal node and having them start again from scratch made no difference. There was virtually no difference between the bunch weight and total bunches. As you can see, basically the yield was driven largely by the number of bunches. So 17.3 bunches per vine, as opposed to the all shoots removed ended up with 7.1 bunches per vine. And this slide here shows how the yield was largely driven by the total bunches per vine as opposed to the bunch weight or any other factors. Manageability at pruning. At pruning time, Xavier and I went out and Xavier pruned back the vines and made some observations, and these results are from those observations. This first slide here is the no management. The second one is remove the damaged tissue, and the third one is remove the spur above the basal node. You can see there's quite a lot more growth on the first compared to the second compared to the third, as you'd expect. Now what we found was with the no management treatment, the wood was weakened. It had quite a lot of cellular leakage within the spurs, so when we cut the canes back, if you had a look at the spur, there was actually some brown areas, and that was from leakage from frost damage. The spurs were quite often thin and very poorly positioned. We ended up with spurs on spurs, in a lot of cases a spur on a spur on a spur. And there wasn't a lot of selection onto where your shoots are going to go, so you're not going to be able to prune back and have a nice open canopy, or have much selection for an open canopy for this following year. The bud viability was less than 80% for that no management treatment. For the removed damaged tissue, the wood was good, nice and healthy, no cellular leakage. The spurs were of mixed quality, so some quite thin spurs, the small finger, some quite thick. The positioning selection was the same as for the no management treatment, where we ended up with a spur on a spur. There wasn't